First of all, I want to say, I know that I have not been here for like a month now, but I just had some crazy stuff. Life is, my job has changed a little bit, so my schedule's a little different. And then I drove back to Michigan last weekend and got a car, and it's just all been kind of crazy. So I'm back, though. I'm here. I'm not going anywhere, but I am happy to be here this morning. I'm excited about this series. This series, like the Back Against the Wall series, this idea is a really fun one for me. It's a really interesting series for me in concept so far. It's been really fun to think about because when your back is against the wall, as humans, when our back is against the wall, like anything can happen, right? The craziest things can happen in those moments, but really we have like two instincts that we like run with when our back is against the wall, right? And it's fight or flight. Right? We decide in those moments like fight or flight, and now some people are weird and they like freeze in those moments, and so like there's a third, but not a lot of people do that. So it's like a fight or flight thing. But inside those two like natural instincts for us, there are like 1,000 things that could happen. Right? We can make 1,000 different choices in those moments when our back is against the wall that could change, like dramatically change the outcome of whatever that situation is. And so to think about moments in the Bible where there have been people with their backs against the wall, knowing that all those little decisions that they're making like change the whole thing, it's just been a really interesting thing for me to think about and to look at in this series. So this morning we're going to go to John 5, and we're going to talk about the story of Jesus healing the guy at the sheep gate. We're going to read John 5. And now if you know what John 5 is, if you know what this story is, you'll understand this. I read it through the first time, and immediately I texted Justin and I said, hey, look, I know I've been gone for a few Sundays now, but are you going to have me preach about like working on the Sabbath? Is that really what we're doing here? It was a joke. He understood. It's not why, but like that's what we're talking. That's what they talk about. So John 5, this is Jesus gets persecuted for working on the Sabbath day. So I just had to text him. I knew he wasn't talking about that, but that's where I went. My first thought. That's where it went to. But so let's just read it. We're going to read John 5, 1 through 17, and we'll jump in after that. Okay, John 5. Starting out in verse 1, it says, after these things, there was a feast of the Jews, and Jesus went up to Jerusalem. Now stop there. After these things, like what are we talking about here? So you go to John 4, and you read that Jesus talks to the Samaritan woman at the well, and he's talking to her. He has a whole conversation with her about her 5 husbands and all that, and then he heals the official's son. Like the last part of John 4 is when he heals the official's son, who's like, the son is not actually with them. He's somewhere else, and the official's there, and he's asking Jesus for healing. So Jesus has done some pretty cool things. And then we get into this, right? So we'll start again. But John 5, verse 1, it says, after these things, there was a feast of the Jews, and Jesus went up to Jerusalem. Now in Jerusalem, by the sheep gate, there is a pool, which in Hebrew is called Bethesda, having 5 porticos. In these porticos lay a multitude of those who were sick, blind, limping, or paralyzed. Now a man was there who had been ill for 38 years. Jesus, upon seeing this man lying there, and knowing that he had already been in that condition for a long time, said to him, do you want to get well? The sick man answered him, sir, I have no man to put me into the pool when the water is stirred up. But while I am coming, another steps down before me. Jesus said to him, get up, pick up your pallet, and walk. Immediately the man became well and picked up his pallet and began to walk. Now, it was a Sabbath on that day, so the Jews were saying to the man who was cured, it is the Sabbath, it is not permissible for you to carry your pallet. But he answered them, he who made me well was the one who said to me, pick up your pallet and walk. They asked him, who is the man who said to you, pick it up and walk? But the man who was healed did not know who it was, for Jesus slipped away while there was a crowd in that place. Afterwards, Jesus found him in the temple and said to him, behold, you have become well. Do not sin anymore, so that nothing worse happens to you. The man went away and informed the Jews that it was Jesus who had made him well. For this reason, the Jews were persecuting Jesus, because he was doing these things on the Sabbath. But he answered them, my Father is working until now, and I myself am working. Wow, a lot of story, right? A lot of things happen in this story, and to me, I think there are 3 moments in this story where our guy that got healed, he is put into situations where his back is against the wall a little bit, okay? There are 3 decisions that he makes in this story that I want to talk about this morning, and just because the choices that he makes, I think have larger repercussions than he is probably thinking about in these moments. But it's something that he does, right? He makes these choices, and you'll see. We'll get there. We'll get to them all, okay? So the first choice he has to make is when Jesus approaches him. And Jesus asks him the question that, to me, has a very obvious answer. Right? This man is laying here. He is obviously ill. He's been ill for 38 years. And Jesus says, do you want to be healed? Well, yeah, I'm here for a reason, right? Like, he is there for something. And so to me, it's an obvious question. And I would say that for most of us, it's probably like an obvious answer, like, of course I want to be healed, dude. What are you talking about? But in that moment, there was a beep. No, in that moment, he has to make a decision, okay? Because as we read that, at this point, he does not know that this is Jesus. This is just a man. He is laying here. He's trying to get healed. He doesn't know who just approached him and who asked him if he wants healing, if he wants to be healed. He just knows that this is a man that's asking him if he wants help, or a man that's got a question for him. Now, for all of the gentlemen in the room, how easy is it to answer, yes, I need help? Very easy. Thanks, Tim. Right? It is not always the easiest thing to turn around and say, yeah, I need some help here, right? He's been at this for some time. Now, I don't know if he's been at this for 38 years or he's just been sick for 38 years, even if he's been sitting here for a year. This man has been at this for a while. Like, he has gotten stubborn. There's no way he is not like, I'm doing this. I'm going to get into that pool, right? So when Jesus asks him the question, do you want to be healed? He's got to make a choice, right? He's been sitting here for however long he's been sitting here. He's got to make a choice. Do I turn around to this guy and say, man, I'm good. I got this. I've been here for a while. What's a little while longer, right? Like, I'll get there eventually. I can do it on my own. I've got this. I don't need any help. We're all good. Or can he turn around in that moment? A guy asks him if he wants some help. Turn around in that moment, swallow his pride, and say, man, I need some help. And to me, the way he answers this question shows that he had, at this point, he was like between a rock and a hard place, right? Back against the wall. Because he doesn't say like, yeah, I want to be healed. He says, man, I got no help. There's nobody here to help me. I've been trying, and every time I get close, someone who moves better than I do gets in the pool before I do. I don't have anybody to help me. He didn't answer yes or no. He didn't tell Jesus that he wanted to be healed. He just says, there's nobody to help me because he's stuck. Right? He is stuck in this place. And so he tells Jesus, he turns around and he tells Jesus, like, yeah, I need some help. I've got no help. Nobody here is going to help me get into this pool. What am I going to do? What am I supposed to do? Yes, of course I want help getting healed. And like, bam, right? Jesus heals him. He's like, all right, get up. You're good. Get up. All right, that's the first choice he makes, is whether or not he wants Jesus' help. Now, I don't think that Jesus was going to, if he said, nah, I got this, I don't think Jesus was going to walk away. I think he was going to heal him anyways. But in that moment, he still had to make the choice. He didn't know that this was Jesus. The second choice that our guy's got to make is actually like right thereafter, the next thing that happens in this moment. He gets healed, and Jesus tells him, get up, pick up your pallet, and walk. Pick it up and go. You're good. Now, in that moment, we got to understand that this guy, I have to believe that this guy, he knows where he's at, right? He knows that it is the Sabbath day. He knows he's not supposed to pick that pallet up and not supposed to do that kind of work on the Sabbath day. He knows that. I have to believe that he knew that. And yet, this man just came in, and he doesn't know it's Jesus. He just knows he just got healed by somebody. Right? This man that just healed me is telling me I got to pick that up. Like, what am I going to do? Again, he's stuck. He can't just back out of it. He can't be like, let me tell you in a little bit. I'll get back to you on that one, right? He can't. That's not going to happen right here. He is stuck. He's got his back against the wall. He's got to make a choice. Do I pick up my pallet? Do I break the rules and the traditions and the laws that I know to be what they are? I know that I'm not supposed to do this thing. Do I break those rules and listen to this guy that just healed me? Is this just random guy? I don't know who this guy is, but he just healed me. So like, obviously he's got some sort of power, right? He's done something amazing here. Do I listen to him, or do I go on? Do I I stand up like, ooh, got some fresh legs. I'm good, but I'm going to stay here and sit back down, right? Like, Do I just sit back down right here because I'm not supposed to do that? Because the society, whatever the rules, governing rules, have told me that I'm not supposed to do that? Man, he's got to make a choice. Because he can't just be like, I'll get back to you in a few minutes. Like, let me think about this. I'm going to get back to you, right? But like we know, he picks it up, right? He picks up the pallet and he walks. Now, again, I have to believe that he knew what was happening there. He knew what he was doing. You know, he could have been like so excited that like he didn't even care. He's healed. It's been 38 years, and he's healed now, and he's just so pumped about it that he's just going to get up and he's just going to listen to whatever happens. Like anybody tells him to do something, like at this point, he's just going to do it. Like climb that wall. Like I got you, right? And so he's just going to do it. He could be so excited. That's just what he's going to do. But I have to know. Like I believe it, that he knew what he was doing. But is he thinking about the repercussions for that decision right there? That he's going to be walking through town and he's carrying his pallet and like the people in town are like walking by him like, oh my gosh, do you see him? Oh, don't look at him. Like, no, you can't be doing that. Like, Johnny, turn your head away. Don't make eye contact, right? Like he's an embarrassment because he is doing the thing that he is not, like everybody knows he's not supposed to be doing this. And yet he's doing it. Does he think about those repercussions in that moment? Like the moment he decided to pick it up, is he thinking about what that's going to look like when he's walking down the road? He's got to know people are going to talk. Right? He's got to know that this decision is going to come through and people are going to start saying stuff, whether they say stuff to him or they say stuff to each other about him. Like everybody is going to be talking about this because he's breaking a rule that he knows and that they all know is there. I just wonder, like, does he think about that? Is that something that goes through his head? Or is he just so excited that he got healed that, you know, the man that healed me told me I could do it, so I did it. Like, and that's what his answer is. I don't know who that guy was, but he told me I could, and he healed me, so I did. Like, that's all he knows. Again, he still doesn't know this is Jesus. He still doesn't know. So that's our second choice. Third choice that our guy makes is a little down the road, right after he talks to all the Jews are yelling at him, and he tells them he doesn't know who this person is because the crowd, like Jesus has slipped away. Well, Jesus goes and sees him in the temple, and he tells him he's been healed, and you've become well, and stop sinning so that nothing worse happens to you. Now, if somebody walked up to me and was like, hey, you're good, you've been healed, now stop sinning for nothing else happens to you, I'm not going to look at that person and say, man, you are Jesus. I don't know how he found out that this was Jesus, but after this interaction, he knows that this is Jesus because he walks out and he tells everybody. I don't know how he found out. There might be more conversation that we didn't get in here, but like he knows, he figures out that this is Jesus. And so at this point, he's got to make another choice. He is going to leave the temple and he can do one of two things. One, he can walk out of the temple and he can hold his head high and he can know that Jesus is the one that told him that he was allowed to break the Sabbath for that. He can walk through town, and it doesn't matter what anybody else is saying. It does not matter to him because he knows who is the person. Now he knows who told him he was allowed to. He knows it's Jesus. And he could just walk on with his life, content because he knows what happened. Or what he does is he walks out there and he's like, you're a bunch of fools. It was Jesus. He told me. Like everybody that looked at him funny, everybody that like turned an eye on him, he was like, no, Jesus said I could. Jesus said I could. Jesus told me to. Don't be wrong. Jesus told me to, right? At this point, he's saving face a little bit here, right? He's saving a little bit of his status. Like, I'm not a bad person. I was following it, but Jesus said I didn't have to, and that's Jesus. And he's Jesus, so I get to, right? He's the one that told me to. Now, again, is he thinking about what this means for Jesus? Does he think about in that moment, like, is he worried about what him going out and telling everybody this means? Does he think that this is going to get Jesus persecuted for working on the Sabbath? Is he thinking about what this means for Jesus and his ministry and all of the things that Jesus is doing? Is he worried about that? Or is he just worried about, like, himself? And what it means now that he can tell people, like, I didn't really do the wrong thing. I was told by Jesus to do the wrong thing, so it's the right thing. Right? Is that all he's worried about? Obviously, rhetorical question, but like, think about that. Is he worried about those things or what that little decision can make? Because to me, to us, they seem like pretty easy decisions, right? You're laying there. You've been sick for 38 years. Do you want to be healed? Well, yeah. All right, well, I healed you. Now pick up your pallet and go. Okay. Like, you just healed me. All right, I'm going to do it. And then you're getting yelled at by a bunch of people, and all of a sudden you're like, oh, hey, no, that guy right there, he told me I could. Look, it's that guy right there. That just seems like pretty everyday decisions that we make. But they all have repercussions, right? They all have ways of changing the situation, the outcome of the situation. And now I think I'm going to get into a couple of things, but I think that, I do think that Jesus wanted this to end up the way it ended up. Obviously, I think he knew it was going to do that, but I think that's what he wanted. I think these choices that guy made led to something that was bigger than that guy ever thought about, because Jesus was the one thinking about it. And so I think that it worked out, but he still made 3 choices with his back against the wall that were crazy. Now, I'm going to make a couple of points this morning. They're not going to be fancy points like Justin. I don't have tidbits of knowledge to throw on the screen for you. Justin's flash knowledge that we get. He doesn't call it that. I just call it that. It would be fun if he did, though. But just a couple of points that I want to think through together. All right? Think through together with us this morning. Okay? Now, the first one is this. I genuinely believe that everybody in this room, I'm not supposed to say everybody, most people in this room have been in a situation just like our man was in at the beginning of this story. Now, maybe it's not like a physical, been ill for 38 years. Some of us haven't been alive for 38 years, but, it's just me and the youth, so. Just kidding. Justin's in there too. But, that's right. We've all been there, though. I think we have all really, really been there. Not physically, maybe, but in a metaphorical sense, we have been in a situation where we are trying. We are scrapping, we're fighting, we are trying to get to something that we just can't get to. We can't seem to make it work. We can't seem to get where we're trying to be. In a spiritual sense, an emotional sense, in a physical sense, anything. We've been trying on our best. We've been doing everything we can to scrape and claw and to get to that thing. And it seems like we're never going to get there. Maybe it hasn't been 38 years, but maybe it feels like it's been that long. Because all we're doing is trying. And it turns out, you read this story, all we really got to do is turn around and ask for help. Right? All we got to do is turn around, swallow our pride, and say, hey, I need some help. I can't do this thing. I need some help. I think we've all probably been there. And if you haven't been there, or you don't think you've been there, or maybe you're there now, I don't know. But I think we've all probably been in a situation very similar to where our guy is at the beginning of this story. And all we got to do is turn around and say, God, I need some help. I can't do this thing. I need some help. And in this story, it shows me that our God is there. He's standing there waiting, right? Not only is our God standing there waiting, but Jesus didn't just walk up to this guy, right? I have this picture, this image in my head, right? Jesus walks up to this guy, and he's standing there, twiddling his thumbs, whistling away, woohoo, waiting, just waiting. Eventually he'll ask me for help, right? If I just stand here long enough, he'll get uncomfortable and turn around and be like, dude, what are you doing, right? That's not what Jesus did, though. In this story, Jesus sought out this man. He walked up to this man, and he didn't just stand there and wait for him, right? He actually looked at this guy and he said, hey, do you want to be healed? Is that what you want? Because more than us just having a God who's standing right behind us, with us, we have a God who seeks us out. Who seeks us out all the time. Right? He's the God that leaves the 99 to go find the one. Because he is seeking us out. He wants to help us. Is he going to stand there and wait for us to scrape and claw and do it ourselves or try and do it ourselves? Well, yeah, he's going to let us try. But when we turn around and he offers that help, it's there, and we are like, yes, I want that help. He is there to give it every single time. Because our God is standing there. He's ready. He's wanting to help us. All we got to do is turn around and ask. Realize that we can't do it on our own, and turn around and ask. Man, anybody could have walked up and helped this guy. Clearly, nobody did, but anybody could have. They just had to lift him up and put him in the pool. But Jesus came along, and Jesus didn't even lift him up and put him in the pool. He just spoke to him. He said, man, you're good. You're healed. Get up and let's go. Can you imagine having that kind of power in your corner? Right? We have that kind of power, that kind of God behind us, waiting for us. And we pray for Roxanne this morning because we believe, truly believe, that God has that power and still does those kind of things. Just turn around and ask. Just turn around and ask. Back against the wall, you need help. Turn around and say you need help. And God is there. Second point I want to make this morning is kind of what I think is like the bread and butter of this story, okay? Jesus performed a lot of miracles. And I can say a lot of miracles because I've performed exactly this many. And he's got more than that, and so I think it's a lot, right? That's a lot to me. He performed a lot of miracles. This is not the only time that Jesus healed somebody. It's just not. So I don't actually think that we still talk about this account of the man solely because Jesus healed him. Obviously, it's still a miracle, right? We're still talking about a miracle that Jesus performed here. But I don't think that's the only reason we talk about it. I think that something else happened in this story that is bigger than even that, than even the miracle being performed. And I think Jesus knew it was going to happen, and yet all of our guys' decisions that led up to that point, they really worked like perfectly to get to this point where Jesus can do this thing. And it's at the very end. It's the last verse in John 5. It's not in John 5, just in our story. The last verse, John 5:17, right? And it says this. It says, but he answered them. It says, my Father is working until now, and I myself am working. Now, they're talking to him. He's being persecuted about working on the Sabbath right here, right? Working on a Sabbath day. But, we don't live in that time where working on a Sabbath day is still something that most of us Christians are focused on or worried about or thinking about, really. But here in this moment, Jesus makes this remark to a group of people, and this is what he says. Now, knowing we live on this side of the cross, right? We know what Jesus said here. Jesus is saying, hey, God was working before. Up until this point, God's been working, and he's going to continue to work, right? Jesus is going to continue to work. He's been working up to this point, and we're going to continue to work. And now, to me, I really do think that this is the bread and butter of this story right here. This is the important part of this story that Jesus wanted to make this point. That it does not matter what you've been doing for the last year, 5 years, 10, 38 years of your life. Doesn't matter how hard you've been trying or how much you've been doing or what you've been trying to do it all by yourself. Through all of that, God has been working. And the day you turn around and say, God, I'm ready, I need the help, he is going to continue to work. He's been working up to that point, and he's going to continue working beyond that. Not just in people that are asking for the physical healing or anything, but in each and every one of our lives. It doesn't have to be this a big moment in our lives that we need help with. It doesn't have to be something that's kind of taken over our lives. This is Jesus telling us that God was working then and has continued to work and will continue to work. He's not going to stop working. Now, I think this concept can be really hard for us to get. And I think in these moments, when I talk about God working and God working on our lives and everything, it's really easy for me to go to Jeremiah 29:11. Okay, that's kind of been a verse of my life that I've used, that I've been said a lot to. It's kind of changed and morphed a little bit in my understanding. But Jeremiah 29:11, right? For God knows the plans, because God's got plans for us. And it's easy for us in those moments, in moments of our lives where we don't really feel like God's got a plan, to look at that and say, he's got a plan. But it's also really easy for us to look in the moments when life is hard, when we are struggling, to look and say, you know what? God is working in this thing. In those hard times in life, in the situations that are rough for us, it is hard for us to look at those moments and say, God is working in this thing. And I know that. I've been there, right? Most of people in here know that I had brain surgery when I was 18. I was a little feller back then, but I had brain surgery. And most people know, most of you guys all know, that I work at the Stewart Home now, right? It's a school for special needs people. That's where I work. And the physical, getting to that job is a really fun story. It's a really cool story. I felt God working in all of that. The why that I work at the Stewart Home, not a lot of people know. And in the moments of all of that building, I didn't think, you couldn't have convinced me if you tried that God was at work. Because after I had my brain surgery, I had to go to rehab. I had to do a lot of rehab, physical therapy and fine motor therapy and speech therapy and all sorts of stuff to get back to where I was before, so I could try and go back to college, right? I had to do all of that, all of those therapies. And I was in a facility up in Michigan that was majority people with special needs. Down syndrome, autism, cerebral palsy, mostly people with special needs, and Jeremy. And in those days, when I first started, I remember the humbling feeling of, my goodness, I am working on the same stuff, right? I am trying to get back. I hoping that I could get back, but I was angry. Let me tell you something. In those moments, you could not have convinced me if you tried that God was at work in my life. I was mad, right? That's where I was. And then I started doing the therapies, and things started getting better, and I started improving, and I got to a point that I was good. I had made it back to where I was before. But the day that I walked out of that place, I remember seeing the same people that I started therapy with still working on the same stuff they were working on when we got there. And in that moment, I knew what I wanted to do. I knew that I was going to find a place like the Stewart Home, and I was going to work with people who have special needs. And now, looking back on that, I can tell you, you couldn't fight me, you couldn't convince me if you tried that God wasn't working on me back then. Working on my heart, changing the way that I thought about things, doing things in me that I had no idea. And I promise, in the moment, you would have never convinced me of that. And now, looking back, you'll never convince me otherwise, right? Because God is working. He's been working on your life, whether you felt it in the moment or not, and he's going to continue working in our lives. It's not something that just happens one time, and he worked, and then he did the work, and now the work is over, right? That's not it. He has been working the whole time, and he's going to continue to work. And I can tell you that because I've been there. I know how hard it is to see in those moments, in those times where life is hard, where you are going through something that's seriously tough and a serious struggle, to go through those moments and to be I don't understand. There's no way that God is working through this. And someone tells you Jeremiah 29:11, you're like, really, this is God's plan for me to be here, going through what I'm going through right now? And it's really hard to see. It is really hard in those moments to see that God is at work. But I would encourage you to go read John 5:17, right? My Father has been at work until now, and I myself am working. God has been working the whole time, and he's going to continue to work. It's not something that he's just going to do one moment, and then he's done working, and there's no more work to be done. He's been working the whole time, and he's going to continue to work through your life. I would encourage you guys today, or in the next weeks, months, whatever it is, think about those times. Think about those times in life where you were like, there's no way God was doing anything. There's no way he's working any part of this. Look at those times now. It took me 6 years to realize that I had been put into a situation when I was 18 that prepared me for where I'm at now. Right? Took me a long time to realize how all that stuff fit together. But I am telling you, and I can tell you with confidence because it's right there, that God has been working. That he was working on something. Whether we see it or not, he was working on something. And it's something that eventually we will get to see, like work out. And work out in a way that's not just good for us, but that we can use to glorify God, right? Because he is doing something bigger than us. Jesus was doing something bigger than this guy. It wasn't just about healing him. He wanted people to understand that God has been working. Up until this point, God has been working the whole time. And he's going to and now Jesus is going to continue to work. He wanted them to know this. Not just know that he's got the power to heal somebody, but to let them know that he is not done. He never stopped, and he's not going to stop working on us in our lives. For those of us that know Jesus, that have accepted Jesus, that trust him and believe that he is who he said he is, he is going to work from that day on. He is working on us, whether you can see it or not. And if you're in something, a hard time, you can't see it right now, I would encourage you to read the story. Go read John 5. Because I promise he's not done working. Why don't you guys all stand up? We're going to jump back into worship here.